Good morning and welcome to the FLSA Informational Open Session. I'm Adam Beck. I'm the Senior Director of Classification and Compensation. And also here today to help answer questions, we have Jenny Helms, Roberta Price, and Cookie Dace from Classification and Compensation. We have Vanessa Ragland and Janet Longer from the EHRA Non-Faculty Human Resources Office, and Frank Lewis from Academic Personnel. So we're going to start by walking through just some of the backgrounds of this and what some of the changes are, and then we'll have some time at the end for any questions. So the topics we'll cover is, first of all, what is the Fair Labor Standards Act? What things are changing and not changing? What does this mean for our employees and supervisors who are affected by this here? A little bit about time reporting and pay logistics, and then our open discussion and questions. So first of all, what is the Fair Labor Standards Act? It is one of the most important and most sweeping federal laws that governs employment, and it was first enacted in 1938. It's administered by the Department of Labor, and almost every employee and employer in the United States, including UNC Chapel Hill, is covered by the requirements of this law. And among other things, it governs youth employment standards, employer record-keeping requirements. It was the law that established the concept of a national minimum wage, and also the law that established the concept of the 40-hour work week and overtime requirements. So it identifies two types of employees, the exempt employee and the non-exempt. So non-exempt employees are subject to all the requirements of the Fair Labor Standards Act, and exempt employees are not subject to the overtime requirements. So those employees here would report only their leave time, and they aren't eligible to earn any sorts of overtime compensation, while our non-exempt employees are subject to the overtime provisions. They report all their work time and all their leave time, and they are eligible for overtime compensation, either in the form of pay or compensatory time. So there are three tests for an employee to be exempt from the overtime requirements of the FLSA. First of all, they have to be paid on a salary basis, which means they regularly receive a predetermined amount of money each pay period that's not reduced due to the quality or quantity of their work. They have to meet the salary level test, which means they receive at least a minimum weekly amount of pay regardless of their FTE, which is set forth by the Department of Labor. And then they also must pass the duties test, meaning that the duties of their job meet one of the Department of Labor's standard requirements for exemption. They have several different categories. And in order for an employee to be exempt from overtime, they have to meet all three of these tests. So what's changing with the FLSA? The minimum salary since 2004 that an employee must earn to be exempt from overtime has been $455 per week. Beginning on December 1st of this year, that minimum salary is moving all at once to $913 per week, so it's more than doubling. The minimum previously was set using a national index, and now it is a very defined amount. It's based on the 40th percentile for full-time workers in the lowest wage census region of the U.S. Previously, the minimum was adjusted irregularly. As we said, the last time it was adjusted was 2004. Going forward, it's going to be adjusted every 3 years with 150 days notice. So it will go up based on that 40th percentile factor every 3 years. So what is changing here, as you can see, is that salary level test from the three that we looked at before. The duties tests and the salary basis requirements for this law are going to remain the same. So what does all this mean for employees and supervisors? First of all, non-exempt employees will need to track and record all of their work time. So those converting from exempt to non-exempt will need to be recording all of their work time. And so what is considered work time? The law specifically defines it as any time that is required, permitted, or suffered. So if it's your regular work schedule and you're required to be here, If an employee is allowed by their supervisor to work extra time, that would be permitted hours. And suffered hours are actually hours that employees work for the benefit of the institution, even without permission. So they still do have to receive compensation for that time as well. It also includes work that's performed after hours, after normal business hours, off-site, especially taking into consideration the use of electronic devices after hours. So responding to emails and texts at home using a phone or a tablet or a laptop is considered compensable time for non-exempt employees and must be recorded. And there are very severe penalties for not monitoring and recording time properly. The institution can be fined. It can lose exemption statuses for classes of employees. And also employees are required to record their time accurately or be subject to disciplinary action. So it's very important that employees are cognizant of all the time that they're actually working and record that on their time card so that they can receive appropriate compensation. And another thing to remember is that for non-exempt employees, for their meal break to be unpaid, it has to be at least 30 consecutive minutes free from any work responsibilities. So if they're sitting at their desk and answering the phone while they're eating a sandwich, that is compensable time. And they must be paid for it. So they must be away from work responsibilities for at least 30 consecutive minutes in order for that time not to be paid. So non-exempt employees will receive compensation for all hours that they work. They will be paid for all hours up to 40 at their regular rate, and then all hours over 40 they'll receive overtime compensation. So overtime compensation is pay at 1.5 times the regular rate, or it can also be given as compensatory or comp time, meaning they earn 1.5 hours per hour worked over 40. And they can use that time for up to a year. Any compensatory time that's earned and is not taken within a year then must be paid out. And note that all EHRA non-exempt temporary and all faculty employees are going to default in the timekeeping system to overtime pay since they're not leave-earning employees, so we don't use comp time for them. All non-exempt SHRA employees and EHRA non-faculty permanent employees will default to either overtime or comp time based on how their department has it set up in the timekeeping system. So non-exempt employees will use TIM to record their time and their leave. EHRA employees are paid monthly, and in the timekeeping system, TIM, they will have a monthly time card view, and they will enter what's called duration time daily. So they will enter the total number of hours that they worked for that day. So if they worked 7 hours, they would put a 7 in for that day, 8 hours, put an 8 in for that day. So they'll be making 1 entry per work day. Any extra time they work that is beyond their regular schedule will actually be paid in the following month's check. So they will continue to stay on the current monthly payroll. No payroll will change, and they will receive their regular schedule pay each month, and then any time they actually work over in that month will be calculated and paid in the following month's check. SHRA employees are paid biweekly, and they will have a biweekly time card view. SHRA employees enter time in and time out daily. So instead of the duration time, they'll actually enter, for instance, that they came to work at 8 a.m., clocked out for lunch at noon, clocked back in at 1 o'clock, and then left at 5 p.m., just for instance. Their regular and their extra time is paid on a 2-week lag, just as it is today, biweekly. So they work a pay period, and then 2 Fridays later they receive a check for all their regular and overtime pay. This is just an example of what an EHRA non-exempt monthly time card will look like. So you can see it's divided out by weeks, and then you will have a view when you scroll down of the entire month on one screen. And EHRA employees should enter their duration time daily and not wait till the end of the month, because going back and trying to keep track of that could cause problems. And then once the pay period actually closes, you wouldn't be able to go back and add any time. And this is what an SHRA non-exempt biweekly time card looks like. And you can see there are spaces for time in and time out for each day of the 2-week pay period. All right, so our last section, what are the things that are not changing as a result of this? No one's benefits eligibility will change as a result of this. Leave earnings remain the same. Employees' status as either SHRA or EHRA will remain the same. And the title and the base pay for employees who are changing exemption status also remains the same. So, are there any questions that we can answer? All right. If you do have any follow-up questions, then your departmental HR officer and representatives are a good resource for you. There is an FAQ about the FLSA on the HR classification and compensation page on the website. And you can also contact the central office for your classification. SHRA can contact their classification and compensation consultant. EHRA non-faculty can contact that office. And any faculty members can contact academic personnel.